Charles Darwin, whose revolutionary ideas would later reshape our understanding of the natural world, was born on February 12, 1809, in Shrewsbury, the county town of Shropshire, located in western England. He came from a prominent family of intellectuals and thinkers. His father, Robert Waring Darwin, was a well-respected physician remembered as much for his towering physique. Over 6 feet tall and weighing an impressive 24 stone, about 336 pounds. As for his medical practice, Charles would later reflect on his father's imposing stature, recalling him as the largest man he'd ever known. These memories were accompanied by his father's hopes that young Charles might one day follow in his footsteps and pursue medicine. Charles's mother, Susanna Darwin, née Wedgwood, came from the renowned Wedgwood family of pottery fame. Tragically, she passed away when Charles was just 8, likely from a severe ulcer or stomach cancer. Charles retained only a few, haunting memories of her, her black velvet gown, her work table, and her final days. This early loss would shape his outlook on life, leaving an indelible mark on his childhood. Darwin's family heritage was steeped in scientific curiosity. His paternal grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a scientist and poet whose work hinted at evolutionary ideas decades before Charles's own theories. In his poem, The Loves of the Plants, 1789, Erasmus speculated about vestigial organs in plants, flies, and even humans, citing male nipples and unused wings in flies as examples. Erasmus also displayed remarkable ingenuity, sketching designs for inventions that included a hydrogen-powered rocket engine, a barge-lifting bridge, and even a copying machine, though many of his concepts remained unfulfilled until long after his death. Remarkably, King George III even offered Erasmus a position as the royal physician, which he declined, preferring to direct his energies toward his writing and philosophical pursuits. Erasmus was also a founding member of the Lunar Society of Birmingham, a gathering of scientists, poets, and industrialists who met under the light of the full moon to exchange groundbreaking ideas, foreshadowing the scientific societies of later generations. Interestingly, Erasmus's progressive ideas and writings were not cherished by his son Robert, who maintained a somewhat strained relationship with him. This distance limited young Charles's exposure to his grandfather's theories, as Robert's focus was primarily on ensuring that his son would pursue a stable career, ideally in medicine. In this environment, Charles's curiosity about science would have to grow in subtler ways. The Darwin household was lively, with Charles growing up alongside 4 sisters and 1 brother. His younger sister Caroline played a pivotal role in his early education. Despite being only 9 years older than Charles, Caroline acted as his first teacher, sparking his initial love for learning. As he grew, Charles began studying under Reverend G. Case, a Unitarian minister who noticed his passion for collecting natural objects like seashells, minerals, and stones. This early fascination with the natural world was an omen of his future pursuits. At 9 years old, Charles was enrolled in Dr. Butler's school in Shrewsbury. Although the school was only a mile from his home, he boarded there, an experience he initially found stifling. He often ran home after school hours for the comfort of his family, later describing these escapes as essential for maintaining his mental well-being. Here, he spent much of his free time absorbed in reading. Byron's poetry and Shakespeare's plays fascinated him in his youth, though his interest in literature waned over time. He also developed a love for tales of exploration, eagerly reading about far-off lands and daring adventures, fueling a lifelong curiosity about the world beyond England. Charles's passion for science was nurtured by family influences and personal exploration. His brother Erasmus shared his interest in chemistry, and together they converted the garden shed into a makeshift lab, conducting experiments that further captivated Charles. Additionally, an uncle taught him about barometers and other instruments, adding to his growing fascination with natural phenomena. Family trips to the Welsh coast provided further opportunities for discovery, as Charles eagerly observed the unique insects and flora that differed from those near Shrewsbury. Despite his growing interests, Charles was a middling student, performing adequately but not excelling academically. At 16, he took the next step in his education, enrolling at the University of Edinburgh. His father, still hopeful that Charles would pursue a career in medicine, saw this as a pivotal step in his son's path toward becoming a physician. However, Charles's experience at Edinburgh would soon reveal that his passions were not fully aligned with his father's expectations. During his studies, Darwin was exposed to various medical practices, though some were quite unsettling. One of his earliest experiences involved observing surgery on children, a procedure that was done without anesthesia, as it had not yet been developed. This exposure was so distressing for Charles that it led to his growing distaste for the field of medicine. Rather than being drawn to the clinical aspects of his education, Darwin found himself captivated by the lectures in natural sciences, particularly those that focused on geology and zoology. In Edinburgh, Charles joined the Plinian Society, a group dedicated to discussing natural history. This society, one of the oldest scientific organizations in Britain, provided Darwin with the chance to connect with like-minded students and professionals who shared his enthusiasm for exploring the natural world. Here, he witnessed heated debates on various scientific topics, including the origins of life, a subject that was controversial for its challenge to traditional beliefs. This exposure marked an early point in his scientific development, shaping his later openness to challenging prevailing notions. As Darwin's interest in the natural sciences grew, he began taking lessons in taxidermy from John Edmonstone, a freed black slave from Guyana who had settled in Edinburgh. Edmonstone's expertise in taxidermy was well regarded, and he had traveled extensively through South America, collecting specimens. Under Edmonstone's guidance, Darwin not only learned the skill of preserving specimens, but he also heard thrilling stories of tropical rainforests and the biodiversity of the Amazon. This mentorship contributed significantly to Darwin's fascination with exotic species in distant lands, sparking dreams of exploration and scientific discovery that would come to fruition years later during his journey on the HMS Beagle. Darwin's fascination with botany also flourished during his time in Edinburgh. The university's extensive botanical gardens offered him a chance to study plants he had never seen before, further cementing his love for the diversity of life. During his studies, he encountered the theories of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, a French biologist who proposed that species evolved over time. While Lamarck's theories differed from what Darwin would later propose, these ideas planted a seed of curiosity, encouraging him to consider the possibility that life was more fluid and changeable than previously believed. Despite his academic interests, Darwin's performance at Edinburgh was unremarkable, as he found himself increasingly disinterested in formal medical studies. This lack of enthusiasm did not go unnoticed by his father, who decided that if medicine wasn't the right path, perhaps the clergy might suit his son better. Thus, after 2 years in Edinburgh, Charles left for Christ's College at the University of Cambridge with the aim of studying for a Bachelor of Arts degree, which would pave the way for a career in the Church of England. At Cambridge, Darwin's scientific interests only deepened. Under the mentorship of Professor John Stevens Henslow, a botanist and geologist, he was introduced to the principles of scientific observation and fieldwork. Henslow quickly recognized Darwin's potential and became a close friend and mentor, famously referring to him as the man who walks with Henslow. Darwin's connection to Henslow would prove instrumental, as it was through Henslow that Darwin was later recommended for the role of naturalist aboard the HMS Beagle, a journey that would define his career and life's work. While at Cambridge, Darwin also developed a passion for beetle collecting, which was considered a popular hobby among naturalists of the time. His enthusiasm for this activity was intense. He was known to dig through mud and scale trees to find new and unusual species. Darwin once famously recounted an incident in which he tried to capture 3 beetles at once, placing one in each hand and attempting to hold the third in his mouth, only to have it release a foul-smelling liquid as a defense mechanism. These early influences, mentors, and experiences shaped Darwin's scientific perspective and fueled his desire to understand life in its vast diversity. His journey from an aspiring doctor to a young naturalist was marked by a series of pivotal experiences and connections that ultimately led him down the path to becoming one of the most influential scientists in history. In August 1831, Darwin received an exciting letter from Professor Henslow, informing him of an upcoming expedition on the HMS Beagle, a Cherokee-class 10-gun brig sloop of the Royal Navy. The ship's captain, Robert Fitzroy, had expressed a desire for a naturalist to join the voyage, though the position would be unpaid. For Darwin, the opportunity to serve as a naturalist on a Royal Navy vessel was an irresistible adventure. However, convincing his father was another matter. Robert Darwin, who had watched his son drift away from medicine and now from the clergy, was initially furious. It took an intervention from Darwin's uncle, Josiah Wedgwood, to sway him. After a lengthy discussion, Robert finally agreed, and with that, Darwin's place aboard the Beagle was secured. On December 27, 1831, the HMS Beagle set sail from Devonport. At just 22, Darwin boarded with a degree in theology and classics, limited formal training in natural sciences, and an enormous sense of wonder. He was the ship's only naturalist, tasked with a role that would require tremendous self-discipline, curiosity, and adaptability. On his first day aboard, Darwin devised a rigorous schedule to cover a range of topics, from meteorology to biology, mathematics, and languages. He reserved Sundays for reading works like Paradise Lost and Humboldt's Personal Narrative, a recounting of Alexander von Humboldt's adventures in South America, which had profoundly inspired Darwin. However, life aboard the Beagle was not without its challenges. Captain Fitzroy, a descendant of Charles II and known for his volatile temper, had a difficult relationship with Darwin. Fitzroy, a firm supporter of slavery, clashed fiercely with Darwin on the issue, leading to arguments so heated that Darwin considered abandoning the expedition. Despite this tension, Darwin managed to establish friendships with some of the crew members, including John Stokes, Charles Masters, and Sims Covington, a cabin boy who later became Darwin's personal assistant. During the initial leg of the voyage, Darwin struggled with intense seasickness. He described the Bay of Biscay as hell, enduring waves and relentless nausea that tested his endurance. But even as he battled the rolling waves, Darwin's mind was at work. He began to see the natural world through the lens of scientific inquiry, increasingly drawn to the idea of natural selection and developing a fascination with fossils. These initial ideas began to take shape as he worked in his small cabin, reading, studying, and reflecting on the diversity of life. In January 1832, Darwin began to apply himself practically, inventing a simple yet effective plankton net that he used to collect and examine samples. His diary entries show his excitement at the vivid colors and intricate forms of these microscopic sea creatures, each one unique. This plankton study marked the start of what would be a lifetime of fascination with organisms at every level of complexity. On January 16th, the Beagle reached the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of West Africa, with Darwin setting foot on the volcanic landscape of St. Ago. The island's rugged beauty captivated him. The dark volcanic rocks, the cries of unfamiliar birds, and the lush diversity of plant life awakened in him a profound sense of wonder. As he walked through the rocky terrain, Darwin noted the presence of hard, white rocks scattered across the landscape. Through close observation, he formed a theory. These rocks had once been molten lava that flowed across the seabed, capturing shells and corals as it cooled, effectively freezing a snapshot of the ocean floor in stone. This was one of Darwin's earliest geological theories, one that foreshadowed his future role as both a naturalist and a geologist. His initial observations and insights into the natural world during his time on St. Jago were the beginning of a transformative journey. As the Beagle continued its course, Darwin's notes became a detailed chronicle of his observations, filled with reflections on the complex interplay of nature, life, and time. On February 28, 1832, the Beagle reached the vibrant shores of Bahia, now a state in Brazil, and home to the city of Salvador. Darwin was immediately struck by the overwhelming beauty of the land, describing it as a chaos of delight. Brazil's lush and unrestrained natural landscape captivated him, and his writings reflect a sense of awe and reverence for the grandeur of nature as he encountered it there. Darwin noted the pleasant nuisance of constantly needing to stop every few steps to examine yet another fascinating creature, plant, or geological feature. In Brazil, he felt immersed in nature at its most opulent, with its countless species and dazzling array of colors and forms. However, Darwin's time in Brazil was marked not only by natural wonders, but by stark encounters with human suffering. Brazil, the last country in the Western world to abolish slavery, held a significant enslaved population during Darwin's visit, and he witnessed the brutal realities of this institution firsthand. Deeply disturbed, he wrote passionately of his hope that one day enslaved people would assert their own rights and forget to avenge their wrongs. These observations intensified his moral stance against slavery and contributed to his growing awareness of the darker aspects of human society, in contrast to the beauty of the natural world he was documenting. Settling temporarily in the small village of Botafogo, just outside Rio de Janeiro, Darwin established a strict research routine. His days alternated between exploring and collecting specimens, followed by analyzing and preserving his findings on the next. From Botafogo, he embarked on a remarkable 3-week journey into the Brazilian countryside, covering hundreds of miles on horseback and exposing himself to a landscape that was both exhausting and exhilarating. Along this journey, Darwin collected a variety of specimens and documented his experiences meticulously, adding to his knowledge of the region's extraordinary biodiversity. In Brazil, Darwin had the chance to witness striking natural events. He observed a vampire bat biting a horse, a moment that he recorded with fascination, studying the behavior of the bat and its effects on the animal. He also made meticulous notes on glowworms, noting the phenomenon of bioluminescence, as well as the colorful patterns of butterfly eyes and intriguing fungal growths. These experiences were both scientific and personal milestones for Darwin, each observation sharpening his eye and expanding his understanding of nature. After several months in Brazil, the Beagle departed from Rio de Janeiro on July 5, 1832, heading south toward Montevideo, the capital of present-day Uruguay. Upon arrival, the crew was quickly thrust into the middle of a political conflict. The city was undergoing a revolution as the Montevideo garrison, led by the influential revolutionary Juan Lavalleja and his faction known as the 33 Orientals, rebelled against the government of President Fructuoso Rivera. Rivera, a veteran military commander and the nation's incumbent leader, faced opposition from Lavalleja's faction, which sought to assert greater control over the region. This encounter with political upheaval left an impression on Darwin. While his primary interest was in natural science, observing these socio-political struggles sparked a realization of how deeply human societies were intertwined with their environments. He saw how landscapes and resources could influence societal organization and conflict, an idea that would echo in his later works on evolution and adaptation. The revolution in Montevideo marked one of many instances during the voyage when Darwin's scientific explorations intersected with the realities of the political and social challenges of the regions he visited. As the Beagle continued its journey along the South American coast, Darwin's notes grew increasingly detailed and reflective, capturing both the natural wonders and the complex societies that inhabited them. His time in Brazil and Uruguay enriched his understanding of biodiversity, human culture, and the forces that shape both, providing a profound foundation for the theories that would ultimately revolutionize the field of natural science. Fitzroy chose not to linger in Montevideo, deciding instead to proceed to Buenos Aires. However, upon their arrival, the Beagle was fired upon by an Argentine naval vessel, an incident that was soon resolved after intervention by the local governor. The crew later returned to Montevideo, where Fitzroy requested permission to dock at a private mooring. From this point, the Beagle continued south along the coastline, allowing the crew to make further observations of the region's unique geography. During one such leg of the journey, Darwin found himself temporarily marooned due to a sudden turn in the weather. While collecting samples on an isolated island, he became stranded for a night when the Beagle could not retrieve him. He would later describe the intense cold he endured, though this unexpected detour led him to remarkable fossil discoveries, including remains of the extinct giant armadillo and the giant sloth. These findings furthered his growing fascination with prehistoric life and the clues it left behind about Earth's past. The Beagle continued a regular route between Buenos Aires and Montevideo, enabling Darwin to send his specimens back to England and receive correspondence from home. Captain Fitzroy, meanwhile, undertook a contentious project. He released 3 Fuegian natives from an earlier voyage whom he had attempted to civilize by Western standards. Fitzroy sent them back to their communities with a peculiar assortment of European items, including cabbages, tea trays, cutlery, and wine glasses. Darwin expressed his disapproval of this endeavor, viewing it as an ultimately futile attempt to impose foreign customs on people whose way of life was vastly different. Over the following weeks, Darwin ventured out on horseback to explore the rugged expanses of Buenos Aires and Patagonia. The journeys were grueling, and he faced the extremes of discomfort, battling persistent thirst, exhaustion from prolonged riding, and relentless mosquito swarms. Jaguars lurking in the forests added a constant threat, instilling a sense of unease in both Darwin and his guides. Yet these excursions provided valuable insights into the natural world, allowing Darwin to document the diverse and often hostile environments of South America. Upon his return to Buenos Aires, Darwin found himself unable to enter the city due to yet another outbreak of political unrest. The ongoing revolution forced him to wait on the outskirts for an extended period, only managing to return to the Beagle on November 4th. The vessel soon set sail once more, stopping at the Rio de Santa Cruz in Argentina, where they anchored to carry out repairs necessitated by the harsh conditions of their voyage. During this downtime, Fitzroy organized an ambitious expedition up the Rio Santa Cruz, planning to reach the Cordillera de la Costa mountain range. The 245-mile journey upstream stretched across 13 grueling days and ultimately ended in disappointment, as Fitzroy deemed the expedition unsuccessful. Nevertheless, this venture allowed Darwin to observe the varied landscape and further deepen his understanding of the geological forces at play in South America. By May 12, 1834, the Beagle embarked on its final southern journey and crossed into the Pacific Ocean on June 9th. The vessel reached Valparaiso, Chile, by the end of July, marking a new chapter in Darwin's South American expedition. Here he set his sights on the towering Andes Mountains, eager to explore the unique ecosystems along their slopes. As he ascended, he documented the striking shifts in flora and fauna, noting how different altitudes nurtured distinct species adapted to their specific environments. However, Darwin's time in the Andes was not without hardship. He contracted a severe illness, later suspected to be Chagas disease, which left him with fevers, swollen lymph nodes, and debilitating headaches. The disease's lingering effects would trouble Darwin for years, potentially contributing to the chronic fatigue, heart issues, and fainting spells that plagued him in later life. In letters sent home from Valparaiso, Darwin described intense episodes of lethargy and moments of disorientation, experiences that foreshadowed the health struggles he would face throughout his career. Despite these physical challenges, Darwin's journey through the Andes marked a period of profound scientific discovery. The mountains presented an ecological tapestry that would inform his theories, demonstrating the adaptability of life and the intricate relationship between organisms and their environment. During his time in the Andes, Darwin embarked on one of his most significant geological expeditions. Ascending to an altitude of 10,000 feet, he marveled at the layered, segmented views of the Earth's structure laid bare along the mountain slopes. Darwin observed how these natural sections resembled the cross-sectional illustrations geologists often use to represent the Earth's interior. This visual proof of geological activity left a lasting impression on him, solidifying his understanding of Earth's dynamic processes. Darwin then undertook one of his longest journeys yet, traveling approximately 450 miles northward and collecting over 100 geological samples along the way. He meticulously labeled and cataloged each specimen, carefully documenting his findings for future study. By this stage, he had been away from England for more than 3.5 years. Though his letters expressed a continued excitement for his research, they also hinted at a strong desire to return home and share his discoveries. On September 7, 1835, the Beagle set sail for the Galapagos Islands, a destination that would become central to Darwin's legacy. As soon as they anchored, Darwin's focus shifted from geology to biology, captivated by the unique flora and fauna that closely mirrored, yet subtly diverged from, those found on the South American mainland. The archipelago's isolation allowed species to evolve in ways that were distinct yet interconnected, providing Darwin with a natural experiment in biodiversity. Darwin's observations of tortoises and birds on the islands were particularly intriguing. Locals could identify which island an animal came from based on physical traits alone, underscoring the idea of localized adaptations. Among the birds, Darwin noted that finches from different islands exhibited variations in beak shape, each adapted to its specific food source, some more suited to insects, others to seeds. Though he did not yet grasp the full implications of this discovery, he recorded his suspicions that these differences represented variations within a species. Reflecting on these adaptations, he wrote, "When I see these islands in sight of each other and possessed of but a scanty stock of animals, tenanted by these birds but slightly different in structure and filling the same place in nature, I must suspect that they are only varieties." These early insights would later evolve into the foundational ideas of his theory of natural selection. After 4 weeks in the Galapagos, the Beagle resumed its journey, crossing the Pacific Ocean. The crew spent Christmas Day in 1835 in New Zealand, where Darwin observed the influence of missionaries. He praised their efforts to improve living conditions and promote education among the indigenous Maori population. One of Darwin's first published reports from his voyage appeared in the South African Christian Recorder, where he wrote that missionaries thoroughly deserved the warmest support, not only of individuals but of the British government. His endorsement, co-signed with Captain Fitzroy, highlighted his respect for those who were making positive contributions to the societies they served. On January 12, 1836, the Beagle landed in Australia, marking the 5th year of its expedition. Darwin noted with concern the severe impact that European diseases, such as measles, had on native populations, and he expressed relief at his own immunity. His observations reflected an emerging awareness of the complex and often detrimental consequences of colonial expansion on indigenous communities. In Australia, Darwin continued to ponder the remarkable parallels and contrasts he observed in species across continents. He noted a fascinating similarity between the mammals in Australia and those on other continents, a convergence that had seemingly developed independently. It seemed as if two creators had arrived at the same product through entirely different processes, he mused, amazed by how evolution's diversity still resulted in similar forms adapted to their unique environments. With the Beagle now steering a course back to England, the journey took Darwin on an unexpected stopover in Bahia, where they had first landed 4.5 years prior. Darwin's longing for home was palpable. He wrote, "We have now steered, thanks to God, a direct course for England." Reflecting on the vast landscapes and the pristine, untouched natural world he had encountered, Darwin described an almost spiritual reverence for nature, writing that these experiences inspired a feeling that there is more to man than the mere breadth of his body. This voyage, he realized, had not only expanded his scientific understanding, but had also changed him profoundly. On October 2, 1836, the Beagle finally docked at Falmouth in Cornwall, England. Just 2 days later, Darwin returned home to Shrewsbury after over 5 years abroad. His family, particularly his father, welcomed him with pride. His father, once skeptical of Darwin's career choice, was now impressed by his discoveries and supported his path as a naturalist. Eager to formalize his findings, Darwin traveled to Cambridge and then to London to arrange and publish his official zoology of the voyage of the Beagle. This work encapsulated his observations and discoveries and garnered admiration, including praise from his hero, Alexander von Humboldt, for his descriptions of the tropics. Over the 1840s, Darwin published several influential works based on his observations, including coral reefs, volcanic islands, and geological observations on South America, establishing himself within the scientific community. During this period, Darwin encountered key figures who would profoundly influence his thinking. Among them were Sir Charles Lyell and Sir Joseph Hooker. Lyell, a prominent advocate of uniformitarianism, the idea that present-day natural laws have always existed, impressed Darwin with his belief in gradual, continuous processes shaping the Earth. Darwin adopted this concept, later using it as a foundation for his own ideas about gradual change in organisms. In Hooker, Darwin found not only a fellow naturalist, but also a close friend and confidant. It was to Hooker that Darwin first revealed his theory of natural selection, a secret the two men kept for years. Darwin's correspondence with Hooker deepened his resolve to develop his ideas further, and by the time he returned from his voyage, Darwin was certain that species underwent transformation over time. In July 1837, Darwin began working on a new project, tentatively titled The Transformation of Species. Just over a year later, he had formulated what he would later call the theory of natural selection. This theory was built upon his observations of variation within species, especially in relation to reproduction. Darwin noted in his notebooks that sexual reproduction produced far greater variation than asexual reproduction. He observed that offspring often differed slightly from one another and from their parents, a phenomenon he referred to as random variation. These differences appeared to be unplanned and lacked any specific environmental purpose. However, some of these variations hindered an organism's survival, while others enhanced it, allowing for better adaptation to the surrounding environment. This idea that small, random variations could accumulate over generations, leading to significant changes, formed the core of Darwin's theory. He was beginning to understand that nature, through selection, could favor advantageous traits over time, ultimately driving the evolution of species in response to their environments. Darwin's theory of natural selection hinged on a simple but profound insight. A variation within a species, if advantageous for survival, could over time become common within a population. Those individuals better adapted to their environment would survive and pass on these traits to their offspring, gradually spreading beneficial variations through the species. This process, Darwin posited, could eventually lead to entire populations in a specific area bearing similar advantageous traits. He delved deeper into this idea of common ancestry, proposing that species sharing few present characteristics might still have diverged from a single ancestor. Fossil evidence supported this hypothesis, as Darwin noted with fascination that seemingly unrelated animals had ancestral links. He reflected on this point, writing, "In South America, the parent of all armadillos might be brother to Megatherium, now dead, suggesting a profound kinship between ancient and modern species shaped by the environments they adapted to over countless generations." Darwin was not the first to recognize diversity in nature, nor to wonder at its underlying causes. Natural theologian William Paley had famously argued for a designer behind the natural world, likening complex adaptations to the craftsmanship of a watchmaker. In Evidence for Christianity, Paley had highlighted variation among plants and animals as evidence of divine intent, a perspective that had once strongly influenced the young Darwin. However, Darwin struggled with this view. While the adaptations seemed purposeful, he suspected they arose from natural processes rather than deliberate design. The turning point came as he read economist Thomas Robert Malthus's essay on the principle of population on October 3, 1837. Malthus argued that population growth would always tend to outstrip food supply, leading to a struggle for existence, where only the most fit would survive. Inspired, Darwin realized that in nature, only organisms best suited to their environments would prevail, preserving advantageous variations while less beneficial ones would disappear. This was the mechanism he had been searching for, and he later wrote that Malthus's work had revealed the mystery of selection. From this point on, Darwin dedicated his life to refining and substantiating his theory, recognizing natural selection as the driving force behind evolution. However, in 1837, Darwin's focus wasn't solely on science. He was also wrestling with a deeply personal question: whether to marry. In late 1837, Darwin meticulously documented his thoughts on marriage, listing its pros and cons. Among the cons, he noted a fear that marriage would curb his freedom to travel and bring added financial responsibility. But the companionship, shared joys, and simple pleasures of family life ultimately outweighed these concerns. He described potential benefits with humor and honesty, writing of a constant companion, charms of music, and female chit-chat, before concluding emphatically, "Marry, marry, marry, QED." Darwin had someone special in mind: Emma Wedgwood, his cousin and close friend. Shortly after recording his thoughts, he proposed, and on November 11, 1838, Emma accepted. In early 1839, they left London for a brief holiday and began their life together, moving into a townhouse at 12 Upper Gower Street on New Year's Day. This marked a new chapter in Darwin's life, as he embraced both the companionship and support that would help sustain him through the coming years of intellectual exploration and discovery. The year 1839 was pivotal for Darwin, who on January 24th, just days before his wedding, was inducted into the prestigious Royal Society. Shortly after, he and Emma settled in London, but his health struggles soon led them to seek a quieter life. They moved to a country residence, Down House, in the Kent village of Down. In this rural sanctuary, Darwin found the peace he craved, as well as ample space to pursue his scientific work. Down House became a gathering place for fellow naturalists, including Joseph Hooker and Thomas Henry Huxley, both of whom were regular visitors. In late December of 1839, the Darwins welcomed their first child, William, into the world. William's development fascinated Darwin, who carefully observed and documented his son's early behaviors, creating one of the first detailed records of a child's psychological development. Darwin was a deeply devoted father, often found playing with his children and encouraging their natural curiosity. Down House offered his growing family a nurturing environment where they could enjoy the freedom of the countryside, while Darwin meticulously organized his collection of specimens, records, and correspondence with experts worldwide. Despite his family life and productive work environment, Darwin's health remained a constant struggle. The mysterious illness, which first appeared in 1837, plagued him for the rest of his life, sometimes rendering him too weak to attend significant events, like his own father's funeral. Social gatherings could leave him drained for days, but his dedication to his research never wavered, even when he suffered bouts of self-doubt. He hesitated to publish his work, fearing that his theory lacked sufficient proof to withstand public scrutiny. His initial plan to write a short essay grew into a draft spanning 230 pages, a detailed account of his observations and the evidence supporting his theory. Hooker and Charles Lyell, another scientific ally, both encouraged him to publish, recognizing the importance of his findings. Darwin, however, continued to hold back, meticulously gathering more data to fortify his argument. A turning point came in 1858, when Darwin received an unexpected letter from Alfred Russel Wallace, a naturalist conducting research in the Malay archipelago. Wallace's letter included a manuscript that presented a theory of evolution through natural selection, remarkably similar to Darwin's. Wallace sought Darwin's opinion, unaware of the years Darwin had spent developing the same idea. Though Darwin feared being overshadowed, he respected Wallace's independent discovery and wanted to ensure credit was shared. After consulting with Lyell and Hooker, Darwin agreed to present their theories side by side in a joint paper. On July 1, 1858, both Darwin's and Wallace's works were read before the Linnaean Society and later published in the Society's journal. This joint presentation marked Darwin's first public acknowledgement of his theory of evolution and set the stage for his most influential work. The Linnaean Society presentation fueled Darwin's resolve to publish his comprehensive findings. Over the next 13 months, he worked tirelessly to complete On the Origin of Species, a book that distilled his theories into a cohesive argument backed by extensive evidence. Published in 1859, Origin presented the natural world as an interconnected system shaped by evolutionary forces, fundamentally altering humanity's understanding of life. The book's impact was profound. Over the next several years, Darwin expanded on his ideas in 10 additional publications, exploring various aspects of natural selection and evolution. His work reframed humanity's place in the world, challenging long-held beliefs and establishing a new foundation for biology and natural sciences. Several factors contributed to Darwin's years-long delay in publishing. His cautious nature, desire for a solid base of evidence, and fear of public backlash all played a part. Yet this caution ensured that when Darwin finally presented his findings, he did so with overwhelming support and depth, forever transforming the study of life and the natural world. Darwin's dedication to building a thorough case for evolution was unyielding. After years of painstaking research, including an in-depth study of barnacles, which offered him insights into phenotypic variation and reproductive differences, he finally completed On the Origin of Species. The book was met with immediate public fascination. The entire first edition sold out on its first day. The demand for subsequent editions underscored the book's impact as readers eagerly absorbed Darwin's organized presentation of evolution, backed by extensive evidence from various fields of biology. Darwin's exploration into the evolutionary development of different organisms, his studies on specialized organs, extinction processes, and predictions of human population growth reflected his expansive vision. The scientific community was not only intrigued by Darwin's conclusions, but also by the rigor and thoughtfulness of his approach. Thomas Henry Huxley, a distinguished zoologist and one of Darwin's earliest supporters, famously praised Darwin's work, quipping, "How extremely stupid not to have thought of that." Huxley's endorsement, along with support from eminent figures like Joseph Hooker, Charles Lyell, and Canon Tristram, the biblical zoologist, played a significant role in legitimizing Darwin's theories. However, Darwin's work was met with a storm of controversy. Critics from various backgrounds voiced their opposition, some from scientific perspectives and others from religious convictions. One notable critic was Philip Goss, who, in his book Omphalos, argued that God had created the world exactly as it appeared, suggesting that nothing had evolved since creation. Goss's work failed to gain traction, yet it reflected a broader resistance among creationists who found Darwin's ideas deeply unsettling. Scientific figures also emerged as opponents, including Adam Sedgwick, who claimed Darwin had abandoned the traditional scientific methods outlined by Francis Bacon. Richard Owen, a renowned anatomist and paleontologist, launched a scathing and elaborate critique of On the Origin of Species. Darwin himself described Owen's review as malignant and clever, recognizing Owen's intellect and influence within the scientific community, which made his criticism particularly potent. Religious opposition was equally fierce. Henry Tryman, a prominent botanist, declared Darwin a serious threat to the doctrine of creation, asserting that On the Origin of Species had rendered Darwin the most dangerous man in England. The clash between scientific and religious perspectives reached a crescendo in 1860 at a famous debate during the British Association meeting in Oxford. During this debate, Bishop Samuel Wilberforce openly attacked Darwin's theory of evolution. Huxley, who had become Darwin's staunch defender, delivered a passionate rebuttal. In response to Wilberforce's scornful remarks about Darwin's theory, Huxley famously retorted that he would rather have an ape for an ancestor than a man who used his intellect to suppress truth. The incident was so charged that it reportedly caused one audience member to faint, a testament to the intensity of emotions that Darwin's work stirred. The Oxford debate underscored the public's polarized response to Darwin's ideas, yet the relentless defense by Huxley and other advocates gradually shifted the scientific community's perspective as more scholars came to recognize the empirical strength of Darwin's arguments. Darwin himself avoided direct confrontations, preferring to let his meticulous research and the voices of supporters speak for him. This approach allowed him to maintain a certain distance from the heated debates, even as he continued refining and expanding his theories in the years that followed. As the publication of On the Origin of Species rippled through the scientific world, it catalyzed a transformation in the study of biology, establishing evolution as a foundational concept. Darwin's influence extended far beyond biology, prompting philosophical inquiries and challenging religious doctrines, which led many to reconsider humanity's place within the natural order. In the years after the book's publication, Darwin published additional works to reinforce and elaborate on his theory, ultimately producing over a dozen books. His contributions shifted humanity's understanding of life on Earth, marking a paradigm shift in how we perceive nature and our own origins. Though Darwin faced significant opposition during his lifetime, his patience, dedication, and rigor ultimately secured his place as one of the most influential scientists in history. His evolutionary theory not only withstood intense scrutiny, but also reshaped humanity's comprehension of the interconnectedness and adaptability of life. Following the success of On the Origin of Species, Darwin's theories continued to face opposition, especially from prominent religious figures. One particularly heated moment occurred during the 1860 debate between Bishop Samuel Wilberforce and Thomas Huxley. Huxley, armed with both scientific arguments and quick wit, famously silenced Wilberforce, leading Darwin to later jest to Huxley, "How dare you attack a live bishop in that fashion?" These public exchanges were not limited to England. Similar debates spread across the United States, Germany, and Russia. Figures like Ernst Haeckel emerged in Germany as vocal advocates of Darwin's ideas, mirroring Huxley's role in Britain, as scientific communities worldwide grappled with the revolutionary implications of evolutionary theory. Darwin's work also attracted attention from political spheres. Karl Marx, a profound admirer of Darwin's contributions to science, sought to dedicate his work Das Kapital to Darwin. However, Darwin declined the offer, preferring to avoid entanglement in political ideologies. Nonetheless, Darwin's legacy found a place in the Soviet Union, where his theories were honored with a statue symbolizing a scientific foundation for the state's atheistic stance and rejection of religious ideology. After the publication of On the Origin of Species, Darwin continued to publish prolifically, producing 10 major works, 6 of which were dedicated to botanical studies. These publications covered a wide range of biological questions, from the mechanisms ensuring cross-pollination in plants to the adaptations of climbing plants. In his study on earthworms, Darwin examined their profound impact on soil fertility and the broader ecosystem, underscoring his dedication to understanding all aspects of natural selection's influence on the environment. Darwin's later works served not only to reinforce his theory of evolution, but also to explore specialized concepts such as sexual selection, a topic he approached in The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. His book, The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication, took a deep dive into domesticated animals like dogs and horses, where he analyzed variations within species, concluding that evolution operated through gradual changes rather than sudden extreme shifts. This work led him to further develop his ideas about inheritance, culminating in his theory of pangenesis. Although he lacked knowledge of DNA, Darwin proposed that small particles, which he called gemmules, carried traits from one generation to the next. While incorrect, this theory represented a determined attempt to explain inheritance mechanisms in an era before genetic science. The Descent of Man was perhaps Darwin's most controversial work, challenging the idea that humanity descended from Adam and Eve by proposing instead that humans evolved through natural selection. Darwin speculated that humans shared a common ancestor with ape-like primates, a claim that later research, including that by Robert Broom, Raymond Dart, and Louis Leakey, would substantiate. Misunderstandings abounded, with critics claiming Darwin argued that humans evolved directly from monkeys, rather than recognizing that humans and monkeys shared a distant, common ancestor. In The Descent of Man, Darwin meticulously examined the physical similarities between humans and other primates, noting the similar structures of organs, muscles, and particularly the brain. He identified vestigial structures in humans, such as the embryonic development of a vestigial tail and the presence of Darwin's tubercle, a small bump on the helix of the human ear, which he linked to the pointed ears seen in some primates. Darwin also emphasized the emotional parallels between humans and primates. He argued that apes exhibited traits such as reason, imagination, and even a basic sense of morality. Darwin observed that primates were capable of experiencing emotions that humans recognize, such as empathy, curiosity, and even sadness, suggesting a shared emotional framework between humans and their primate relatives. These observations not only reinforced Darwin's theories of common descent, but also invited people to reconsider the boundaries between humanity and the animal kingdom, setting the stage for future research into animal behavior, emotions, and intelligence. By the time Darwin's later works were published, his ideas had cemented him as a towering figure in the scientific world. His theories and the evidence he meticulously gathered reshaped biology, anthropology, and even psychology, challenging humanity's understanding of itself. Darwin's work prompted scientific communities and broader society to question long-standing beliefs about the origins and uniqueness of humanity, ushering in a new era of scientific inquiry that would continue to evolve long after his time. In The Descent of Man, Darwin expanded on the concept of sexual selection, proposing that the struggle for reproduction was as vital as the struggle for survival. He observed that animals, especially mammals, often competed for mates through physical displays of strength, suggesting that the size and power of the male could be critical in securing mating opportunities. He used examples like the elephant seal, where males engaged in intense battles for dominance, with the victorious male securing access to a large number of females. According to Darwin, physical combat among males not only facilitated natural selection, but also allowed stronger traits to be passed on through successive generations. For avian species, Darwin identified visual display as a primary factor in sexual selection. In many bird species, males displayed vibrant plumage, often performing elaborate dances or visual rituals to attract females. Darwin noted this behavior in species like the birds of paradise and hummingbirds, where the male's brightly colored feathers and displays of agility played a significant role in courtship. This led him to conclude that sexual selection among birds was primarily driven by female choice, as females appeared to select mates based on the most impressive displays. However, later studies have reevaluated several of Darwin's claims. While he assumed that most animals, particularly birds, were polygamous, research has shown that many bird species practice monogamy. Furthermore, scientists have drawn distinctions between social monogamy, where a pair bond forms for raising offspring, and sexual monogamy, which pertains to exclusive mating behavior. This distinction clarifies that while some bird species may appear socially monogamous, their actual mating practices can vary. Additionally, Darwin's assertion that colored plumage evolved purely to attract mates has also been revisited. Studies now suggest that bright coloration in birds can serve various purposes, including territorial defense and deterring predators. For example, the vibrant colors and size of male peacocks or cardinals may also signal strength and fitness to competitors. These visual signals can serve as a deterrent, warning other males of the territory holder's strength, thus reducing the likelihood of physical confrontations. Darwin also posited that female choice was the primary driver of sexual selection, with females choosing mates based on desirable physical traits. This view has been reconsidered as many mating displays in nature involve a mutual decision-making process where both partners actively engage in the selection. For instance, in some bird species, both males and females participate in courtship dances or rituals that allow each to evaluate the other's fitness and compatibility. While some of Darwin's conclusions have been refined or reinterpreted with new evidence, his pioneering work laid the foundation for the study of sexual selection. Darwin's observations on mating behaviors across various species invited future scientists to delve deeper into the intricacies of reproduction and partner selection. Modern biologists continue to expand on his insights, building a more nuanced understanding of how sexual selection shapes behavior, appearance, and survival strategies in the animal kingdom. In the final chapter of The Descent of Man, Darwin extended his theories of sexual selection to human beings, suggesting that men typically selected female partners based on physical traits such as facial structure and body shape. He noted that human fashion and adornment often accentuated these features, with men's fashion reflecting wealth and status, qualities that in turn influenced women's mate choices. While these ideas were groundbreaking for his time, modern social science has criticized Darwin's human-focused theories for omitting key aspects of social and sexual engagement, including the role of emotional bonds in partner selection and the importance of female choice, which has been historically evident across cultures. Despite these limitations, Darwin's work introduced the concept of sexual displays as a vital element in mate selection. The idea that displays and attraction were connected was a significant step toward understanding sexual selection in humans and animals alike. Darwin's exploration of emotional expression further expanded on these ideas. He observed that humans and other animals, particularly primates, shared similar emotions and physical expressions of these emotions. Darwin was intrigued by complex reactions such as shame and even revenge, noting that certain expressions and responses seemed to be universal among humans, regardless of culture or geography. This cross-cultural consistency led him to conclude that emotional expressions, particularly those evident from infancy, were largely innate. Darwin elaborated on this theory in his 1872 book, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. This work provided a detailed analysis of how various species, including humans, cats, horses, monkeys, and apes, physically displayed emotions. He meticulously documented reactions in many animals, including porcupines, hyenas, and kangaroos, concluding that these displays were essential adaptations linked to survival. For instance, he observed that dogs bared their teeth when distressed, a behavior that likely developed as a prelude to defensive action. And he noted that swans, when angry, arched their wings and propelled themselves forward. Darwin argued that such emotional displays not only prepared the animal for action, but also served to communicate its intentions, potentially deterring adversaries and reducing the likelihood of confrontation. In humans, Darwin took a particular interest in infants and individuals in asylums, collecting photographs that captured authentic expressions of emotion. Through these studies, he identified commonalities in human expressions across cultures, reinforcing his hypothesis that emotional expression had a universal evolutionary basis. This work laid a foundation for later studies in psychology and ethology, influencing how scientists understood emotions as biological and evolutionary traits shared across species. Beyond his work on animal and human emotions, Darwin made substantial contributions to botany, particularly in plant reproduction and pollination. He challenged the prevailing idea that some plants were purely self-fertilizing, arguing that cross-pollination played an essential role in promoting genetic diversity. He drew upon the earlier theories of Christian Conrad Sprengel, who proposed that flowers attract pollinators like bees, which inadvertently facilitate cross-pollination. Darwin expanded on Sprengel's theory, suggesting that the wide variation observed in plant species likely stemmed from a combination of self-fertilization and cross-pollination, thereby enriching biodiversity within plant populations. Darwin's meticulous observations across animal behavior, human emotional expression, and plant reproduction highlighted the interconnectedness of life, where even the smallest displays and adaptations played a part in the grand scheme of survival and evolution. Through his lifelong dedication to unraveling these mysteries, Darwin not only reshaped the field of biology, but also established a legacy that would influence generations of scientists, illuminating the delicate web of natural selection and adaptation across all forms of life. In his later years, Darwin continued to build upon the foundational ideas that had shaped his work in evolution and natural selection, extending his attention to areas such as plant reproduction and the behavior of earthworms. Inspired by earlier works like The Decennium, 1793, which discussed biological principles but received little recognition at the time, Darwin aimed to advance the understanding of plant reproduction, particularly cross-pollination, which fascinated him for its complex mechanisms and adaptations. Darwin's research on orchids highlighted the intricate ways plants attract specific pollinators. He studied various orchid species, noting how their structures had adapted to accommodate the unique anatomies of insects. For example, in studying the Coryanthes orchid, Darwin observed how bees would tumble into the center of the flower, becoming dusted with pollen, which they would then spread to other plants upon escape. This meticulous co-adaptation, where each flower's shape perfectly matched the proboscis of its pollinating insect, led Darwin to marvel at nature's beautiful adaptations, which he described as surpassing anything the human imagination could conceive. Further exploring these ideas in his book Effects of Cross and Self-Pollination in the Vegetable Kingdom, Darwin argued that cross-pollination conferred specific benefits to plants, strengthening the genetic diversity and resilience of species. He noted that certain adaptations, such as flowers with structures that allowed access only to particular species of bees, seemed to arise from mutual influence over generations, fostering a remarkable interdependence between plant and pollinator. Darwin also speculated on plant growth, observing that asymmetrical growth in stems allowed plants to bend, especially as they adapted to maximize exposure to light. This process, he noted, could also occur at night, indicating a growth mechanism beyond mere reaction to sunlight. Darwin's final book, published in 1881, focused on a less celebrated but equally profound subject, earthworms. Conducting much of this research from his home at Down House, Darwin observed how earthworms contributed to soil health and structure. He built a wormstone experiment to monitor how quickly a stone would sink into the earth as worms aerated and redistributed the soil. Through various experiments, he documented their physiology, habits, and even responses to stimuli, noting that a low bass note on a piano would cause the worms to retreat into their burrows. Darwin proposed that over centuries, the actions of earthworms could have significant impacts on landscapes and historical sites. For instance, he suggested that the monoliths at Stonehenge had partially sunk into the earth due to the steady, unseen work of worms over centuries, as had ancient Roman structures, making them resilient to even deep plowing. This work on earthworms, although lesser known compared to his evolutionary theories, illustrated Darwin's deep belief in the power of gradual, cumulative processes in shaping the natural world. It encapsulated a central doctrine in his life's work, that small, incremental actions in nature ultimately have profound effects. During the winter of 1881 to 1882, Darwin's health declined sharply due to heart problems that had plagued him for years. By February 1882, he confided to a friend that he felt his time was near. On April 19, 1882, Darwin passed away, closing a life that had reshaped biological science and expanded humanity's understanding of life on Earth. His work left an enduring legacy, not only for its groundbreaking theories, but also for its meticulous, patient inquiry into the smallest details of the natural world. Following his passing at the age of 73, Charles Darwin was honored with a burial in Westminster Abbey, a resting place reserved for Britain's most distinguished figures. He was carried to his grave by some of the leading scientific minds of his time, including the president of the Royal Society, as well as close friends and colleagues such as Thomas Huxley, Joseph Hooker, and Alfred Russel Wallace, who had shared and contributed to Darwin's revolutionary vision. In being laid to rest beside Sir Isaac Newton, Darwin's interment symbolized his place among the greatest thinkers in the scientific pantheon. Darwin's legacy is profound and enduring. The accomplishments of a man who lacked formal scientific training, yet embarked on the physically and intellectually grueling voyage of the Beagle, and subsequently formulated one of the most transformative theories in biological history, are nothing short of remarkable. Through his exhaustive studies across botany, paleontology, and geology, Darwin laid the groundwork for multiple scientific disciplines, often pioneering entirely new fields of inquiry. His model of evolution by natural selection reshaped the course of biological sciences and challenged foundational religious and social beliefs, setting in motion a profound and ongoing transformation in human understanding. While Darwin's theory of evolution has fundamentally shaped scientific understanding, it has also continued to provoke inquiry and debate, especially in recent years. After Darwin's death, and particularly in the 21st century, scientists have raised critical questions about aspects of the neo-Darwinian model. Notably, at the 2016 Royal Society meeting in London, prominent evolutionary biologists voiced dissatisfaction with the standard evolutionary theory. They argued that natural selection acting on random mutations, Darwin's central mechanism for biological change, might lack the generative power required to explain the emergence of major changes in the history of life. Darwin aimed to provide a model for the origin of life forms that would account for the diversity of species we see today. However, current research increasingly suggests that even the simplest cellular structures are irreducibly complex. While Darwin's theory explains how species evolve and adapt over time, it doesn't fully address the origin of the first life itself, a question that remains unresolved in modern science. In this way, Darwin's legacy endures not only through the answers his work has provided, but also through the new and profound questions it has inspired. Yet in any discussion of Darwin's legacy, it is worth considering the contributions of other figures, such as Alfred Russel Wallace, who independently conceived the theory of natural selection and spurred Darwin to publish his own findings. With the ongoing advancements and critiques in evolutionary science, how should we view Darwin's legacy today? Does his theory still hold the same weight in light of new scientific discoveries? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.